The Galactic Council chambers fell silent when the holographic display flickered to life. Admiral Zyxthar of the Valorian Empire stood at the center podium, his four arms crossed in a gesture of supreme confidence. Around him, representatives from 12 different species watched with varying degrees of interest and fear. "We have received word from the Outer Rim," Zyxthar announced, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "The human colony on Kepler 442b has refused to surrender their mining rights. They have sent a single commander to negotiate." Murmurs spread through the assembly. The Valorians had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade. Their fleet numbered in the thousands, and their warriors were feared across the galaxy. The idea that a single human commander would dare to face them seemed almost laughable. "Who is this commander?" asked Ambassador Thrin, a serpentine being from the Sethian collective. Zyxthar brought up a personnel file on the display. The image showed a woman in her early 40s with short gray hair and calm brown eyes. Her uniform was simple, lacking the medals and decorations that most species use to display military rank. "Commander Sarah Chen," Zyxthar read, "formerly of the Terran Defense Force. She has no significant battle record, no major victories. She spent most of her career in logistics and supply chain management." Laughter rippled through the chamber. The Valorian admiral smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "The humans send us a clerk to negotiate for their planet. Perhaps they have already accepted defeat." But not everyone in the chamber was laughing. In the back row, Elder Morath of the Keithrani Confederation sat very still. The Keithrani were an ancient race, older than most civilizations in the known galaxy. Morath had lived for over 800 years and had seen empires rise and fall. "I would advise caution," Morath said softly. His voice was quiet, but something in his tone made the laughter stop. "I have studied the humans for 3 of their centuries. They are not like other species." Zyxthar turned to face the old Keithrani. "What do you mean?" "When other species face a stronger enemy, they fight with more weapons, more soldiers, more ships. They try to match strength with strength." Morath's ancient eyes seemed to look at something far away. "Humans do not think this way. When they are weak, they become creative, and creative humans are dangerous." The Valorian admiral dismissed this with a wave of his upper arms. "We have faced creative species before. The Thornax tried to use biological weapons. The crystalline mines tried to hack our systems. We crushed them all." "Those species thought in straight lines," Morath replied. "They saw a problem and found a direct solution. Humans think in circles and spirals. They solve problems that you did not know existed. They win battles that you did not know were being fought." The warning went unheeded. 2 days later, Commander Sarah Chen arrived at the Valorian flagship in a small transport shuttle. She carried no weapons, brought no guards, and wore the same simple uniform from her file photo. General Vorthak, the commanding officer of the Valorian invasion fleet, met her in the main conference room. He was massive, even by Valorian standards, standing nearly 3 meters tall with muscles that could crush steel. "You are brave to come alone," Vorthak said, taking his seat at the head of a long metal table. "Or perhaps foolish." Chen sat down across from him, her posture relaxed and comfortable. "I prefer efficient. Guards would just slow things down." "Then let us be efficient." Vorthak leaned forward, his 4 hands flat on the table. "Your colony will surrender all mining operations to the Valorian Empire. Your people will be relocated to a designated sector. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your settlements." Chen nodded slowly, as if considering the terms. "And if we refuse?" "Then my fleet will reduce your planet to ash within the hour." Vorthak gestured toward a viewport, where hundreds of warships hung in the darkness of space. "We have 300 vessels, Commander, 30,000 warriors. Your colony has what? A few hundred soldiers and some mining equipment." "We have 842 residents," Chen corrected. Including children, elderly, and support staff. Our defensive capabilities are limited to standard perimeter security. Vorthak laughed, a deep rumbling sound. Then this negotiation is over. You will sign the surrender documents now. Before I do, Chen said calmly, I have a few questions about your fleet's supply situation. The general's laughter stopped. Our supply situation. Yes, you have 300 ships in orbit. That's approximately 45,000 crew members, including your warriors and support personnel. Chen pulled out a small data pad and began scrolling through information. Your fleet has been in transit for 6 months. Your supply lines stretch across 4 star systems. The nearest resupply station is 8 days away at maximum speed. Vorthak's eyes narrowed. How do you know these things? I spent 20 years in logistics, General. Reading supply routes and consumption rates is what I do. Chen looked up from her data pad. Based on standard Valorian fleet consumption, you have approximately 12 days of food and water remaining. Fuel reserves are at about 60%, which sounds comfortable, but you need at least 40% to make the return journey to your nearest refueling station. The general said nothing. His 4 hands had clenched into fists. Now, Chen continued, her voice still perfectly calm, let's talk about the mining rights you want. Kepler 442b produces approximately 3 million tons of refined titanium per year. That's valuable, certainly. But do you know what else we produce? Enlighten me. Water. Our colony sits on top of one of the largest underground aquifers in this sector. We process and purify approximately 50 million liters per day. Chen smiled for the first time. Water that your fleet desperately needs. Vorthak stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the metal floor. Are you threatening me? Not at all, General. I'm just providing relevant information for our negotiation. Chen remained seated, looking up at the towering alien without any sign of fear. You see, I don't need to defeat your fleet. I don't even need to fight it. All I need to do is make sure you can't resupply from our colony. We could simply take what we need by force. You could try, but our water purification systems are buried deep underground. They're also rigged with enough explosives to create a crater visible from orbit. Chen's smile never wavered. If you attack, we destroy the aquifer. Then your fleet has 12 days to find another water source, and the nearest one is 23 days away. The conference room fell silent. Vorthak stared at the human commander, trying to find some sign of bluffing in her expression. He found none. Your people would die as well, he said finally. Yes, Chen agreed, but we have emergency supplies cached in locations your scanners can't detect. We could survive for months. Your fleet would be dead in 2 weeks. She stood up and walked toward the viewport, gazing out at the assembled warships. That's the funny thing about logistics, General. Wars aren't won by the strongest army. They're won by the army that can still eat and drink after the fighting starts. General Vorthak paced the length of his command bridge, his heavy footsteps echoing against the metal floor. Around him, his officers worked in tense silence. The atmosphere had changed dramatically since Commander Chen's visit 3 hours ago. Status report, Vorthak demanded. His logistics officer, a thin Valorian named Sketh, stepped forward nervously. Sir, I've reviewed our supply situation as the human suggested. Her analysis was correct. Explain. We have 13 days of water reserves at current consumption rates. Fuel is at 58%. Food supplies are adequate for 3 weeks. Sketh swallowed hard. If we reduce to emergency rations and minimum water usage, we might extend that to 18 days, but crew efficiency would drop significantly. Vorthak slammed his fist against the nearest console, leaving a dent in the metal. How did she know? How did a simple human know our exact supply status? Sir, another officer spoke up. Our supply manifests are transmitted using standard military encryption. It's possible the humans intercepted and decoded our communications. She said she calculated it from consumption rates, Sketh added. Valorian fleet logistics follow standardized patterns. Anyone with enough data could make accurate predictions. Vorthak stopped packing. She turned our own predictability against us. We never considered that a weakness. The humans have a saying, sir, Sketh said quietly. They call it thinking outside the box. It means finding solutions that exist beyond normal boundaries. I don't care about human sayings, I care about solutions. Vorthak turned to face his officers. We cannot retreat. The Empire would see it as weakness. We cannot attack without risking total fleet failure. What options remain? The bridge fell silent. No one wanted to state the obvious. Finally, Vorthak spoke again. Contact the human colony. Tell Commander Chen that I am willing to discuss alternative arrangements. The second meeting took place on the planet's surface, in a small conference room adjacent to the colony's main administration building. Commander Chen arrived first, accompanied by 2 colony administrators. They set up chairs and a table, then waited. When Vorthak's shuttle landed, he emerged with only a single guard. The general looked different than before. The arrogance in his posture had been replaced by something more cautious, more calculating. You've put me in an impossible position, Vorthak said as he sat down. I've put you in a position where fighting isn't the best option, Chen replied. That's different from impossible. The Empire expects conquest. If I return without victory, my career is finished, possibly my life. Chen nodded thoughtfully. I understand. You need something to show your superiors, a victory even if it's not the one you planned. What are you proposing? A trade agreement. The Valorian Empire gains exclusive access to our titanium exports at a reduced rate. In exchange, you provide protection for our shipping lanes against pirates and other threats. Chen slid a data pad across the table. On paper, it looks like a tribute arrangement. The humans pay the mighty Valorians for protection. Your empire gets valuable resources without the cost of an occupation, and we get to keep our homes. Vorthak studied the proposal for a long moment. My superiors would never accept a simple trade deal. They won't see it as a trade deal. They'll see it as a human colony bowing to Valorian dominance. The terms are weighted in your favor. We're giving you our resources at below market rates. Chen leaned forward. The question is whether you want a quick victory that destroys your fleet or a slow victory that actually benefits your empire. The general was quiet for several minutes. His guard shifted uncomfortably, unused to seeing his commander in such deep thought. Why? Vorthak finally asked. Why offer me a way out? You had us trapped. You could have simply waited until we were forced to retreat in shame. Because I'm not trying to humiliate your empire. I'm trying to protect my people. Chen's voice softened slightly. If you retreat in shame, the Valorians will send another fleet, a bigger one with better supplies. Maybe they'll succeed where you failed. Maybe they won't. Either way, more people die. And this way, your empire gets what it really wants: resources and influence. We get what we want: survival and autonomy. No one has to die. No fleets have to be destroyed. It's efficient. Vorthak stared at the human commander with new respect. You think like a Valorian strategist, Commander. Cold, practical, focused on outcomes rather than honor. I think like a logistics officer, Chen replied. Every problem has a solution. You just have to find the one that costs the least. The agreement was signed that evening. General Vorthak returned to his fleet and prepared for the journey home. His reports to High Command described a successful negotiation that secured valuable resources for the Empire without costly military action. The Galactic Council learned of the outcome 3 weeks later. Admiral Zykthar presented the news with barely concealed frustration. The human colony remains independent, he announced. General Vorthak claims this was a strategic victory, but the facts speak otherwise. A Valorian fleet of 300 ships was turned away by 800 humans. Elder Morath, sitting in his usual place at the back of the chamber, allowed himself a small smile. It seems my warning was accurate. You spoke of creative thinking, Ambassador Thrin said. What exactly did the humans do? They changed the nature of the conflict. Morath's ancient voice was thoughtful. The Valorians saw a military problem requiring a military solution. The humans saw a supply problem requiring a logistics solution. By the time the Valorians understood what was happening, they had already lost. But they didn't fight at all, another representative protested. There was no battle, no combat. How can this be considered a victory? The humans have another saying, Morath replied. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. They learned this from a philosopher named Sun Tzu, who lived on their homeworld thousands of years ago. The council chamber buzzed with conversation. This was unprecedented. Smaller species had resisted larger empires before, but always through combat, through sacrifice, through costly defensive wars. The idea of defeating an invasion without a single shot fired was revolutionary. I want to know more about this Commander Chen, Admiral Zeixthar demanded. She was listed as having no significant military experience. How did she develop such a strategy? Morath's smile grew slightly wider. That is what makes humans so fascinating, Admiral. They do not separate military thinking from other kinds of thinking. To them, a supply chain expert can be a strategist. A farmer can be a general. A child can ask the question that changes everything. That seems disorganized, Thrin commented. It is, wonderfully, dangerously disorganized. Their greatest strength comes from their inability to accept limitations. Morath rose slowly from his seat. I recommend the Council observe the Kepler 442b situation closely. I suspect Commander Chen's career is only beginning. The Elder's prediction proved accurate. Within months, word of the standoff spread throughout human colonial space. Commanders began reaching out to Chen, asking about her methods, seeking advice for their own defensive situations. Chen established a training program on Kepler 442b, teaching other commanders to think beyond traditional military responses. She called it asymmetric problem solving, finding the hidden weaknesses in any opponent, no matter how strong they appeared. Her students came from colonies throughout the sector. Engineers, doctors, teachers, farmers, people with no military background who suddenly found themselves responsible for defending their homes. Chen taught them that war was not about weapons or numbers. It was about understanding systems, finding pressure points, and applying force where it would matter most. Every enemy has a vulnerability, she told her students. The bigger and more powerful they are, the more they depend on systems that can fail. Find those systems, understand them, then make them fail. 2 years passed. Commander Chen's reputation grew steadily throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council began tracking reports of human colonies successfully resisting larger forces through unconventional means. On Proxima Station, a human colony embedded false data into their defense grid, making their weapons systems appear far more powerful than they actually were. The attacking Drekken horde spent 6 months studying the superweapons before discovering the deception. By then, reinforcements had arrived. On New Shanghai, colonists facing a hostile invasion released millions of small, harmless drones into the atmosphere. The drones did nothing except reflect sensor signals, making it impossible for the attackers to distinguish between actual targets and phantom readings. The invasion fleet spent their ammunition shooting at shadows. On Hope's Landing, a human commander negotiated with the local wildlife. The planet's apex predators, massive creatures called thornbacks, were territorial and aggressive toward all species. The humans learned to avoid their nesting grounds. When the Sylvan Dominion landed ground troops, The colonists simply led them into thornback territory. Nature handled the rest. Each victory was different. Each one came from understanding the specific situation and finding the unexpected angle, and each one was connected in some way to Commander Chen's teachings. The Galactic Council convened a special session to discuss what they called the human problem. Representatives from 43 species filled the Great Chamber, many of them expressing concern about this new pattern. "The humans are becoming too clever," declared Ambassador Vix of the Meridian Compact. "They must be contained before they grow too strong." "Contained how?" asked Elder Morath, who had become something of an unofficial expert on human behavior. "They have no central government, no unified military. They are a collection of independent colonies with no formal alliance." "Then we target them individually, destroy them before they can develop further." "Several empires have tried that approach," Morath replied calmly. "The Valorians, the Drekken, the Sylvan. Each attack has failed. Each failure has made the humans stronger, more connected, more creative." "Then what do you suggest?" Morath was silent for a moment. "I suggest we learn from them rather than fear them. The humans have developed something new, a form of warfare that does not require superior numbers or technology. They win by understanding their enemies better than their enemies understand themselves." "That is precisely why they are dangerous," Vix insisted. "Danger and opportunity are often the same thing, viewed from different angles." Morath turned to address the full council. "I propose that we invite the humans to join our assembly, give them a voice here, make them part of our systems rather than outsiders fighting against them." The suggestion sparked immediate controversy. Some species supported the idea, seeing value in bringing human creativity into the council's collective decision-making. Others feared it was a trap, that the humans would use their position to gain more power. While the council debated, news arrived that changed everything. The Void Swarm had been detected at the edge of the galaxy. The Void Swarm was not a species in the traditional sense. They were a phenomenon, billions of organisms that traveled through space, consuming everything in their path. No one knew where they came from or what drove them. They simply appeared, devoured, and moved on. The last time the swarm had entered this region of space, over 1,000 years ago, they had destroyed 200 inhabited worlds before finally moving on to other galaxies. Entire civilizations had been erased from existence. The swarm's current trajectory will bring them through the outer rim in approximately 3 years, the Council's scientific advisor announced. The first systems in their path are primarily human colonies. A grim silence fell over the chamber. Ambassador Vix, who had just been advocating for human containment, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "What forces can we deploy?" Admiral Zyxthar asked. "Combined council fleets number approximately 50,000 vessels," the advisor replied. "Historical records suggest the swarm can be damaged by concentrated fire, but they reproduce faster than we can destroy them. Previous estimates indicate that defeating the swarm would require sustained firepower equivalent to 100,000 ships over a period of several decades." "We don't have that many ships," someone said. "No species does." Elder Morath spoke into the despair. "Perhaps we should ask the humans for their perspective." Commander Chen received the Council's invitation 3 weeks later. She was surprised. Humans had never been formally invited to participate in galactic governance before, but she accepted without hesitation. When she arrived at the Council chambers, the assembly fell silent. Representatives who had dismissed her as a clerk 2 years earlier now watched with careful attention. "Commander Chen," Admiral Zyxthar said, his tone markedly different from their previous interactions. "Thank you for coming. We face a threat that may be beyond any of our capabilities. We would value your insight." Chen studied the holographic display showing the swarm's projected path. You want me to find a creative solution to an impossible problem. We want you to try, Elder Morath said gently. If anyone can see an angle we've missed, it might be you. Chen spent the next several days reviewing every piece of data the Council had collected about the Void Swarm. She studied their movement patterns, their feeding behaviors, their reproduction cycles. She analyzed the failures of past defensive efforts and the limited successes that some species had achieved. On the fourth day, she requested a meeting with the Council's top scientists. "Tell me about their biology," she said. "What do they actually eat?" "Everything," a Keithrani scientist replied. "Organic matter, metals, energy. They break down any material into component parts and use it for fuel or reproduction. But they must have preferences. They don't just drift randomly, they navigate toward inhabited systems. Why?" The scientists exchanged glances. "We've always assumed they're attracted to energy signatures. Inhabited systems generate more energy than empty space." "What specific type of energy?" Chen pressed. "We don't know. The research was never completed. The species studying them were destroyed before they could finish." Chen nodded slowly. An idea was forming in her mind, one so ambitious that it frightened her, but fear had never stopped her from thinking. "I need to visit a swarm-devastated system," she announced. "I need to see what they leave behind." The journey took 3 weeks. Chen traveled to a system called Kethros Prime, which had been consumed by the swarm 800 years earlier. What she found there confirmed her suspicions. The planets were stripped bare, no atmosphere, no oceans, no organic matter of any kind. But the rocky cores remained. The mineral compositions were unchanged. And most importantly, certain types of energy signatures were completely absent. "They're not attracted to all energy," Chen reported to the Council upon her return. "They're attracted to specific frequencies, the kind generated by life support systems, power plants, and biological activity. They're following the signs of life." "So we should hide our energy signatures?" Admiral Zeixthar asked. "That's impossible. Entire civilizations would have to go dark." "No," Chen's eyes were bright with the excitement of discovery. "We don't hide. We redirect. We create a trail of energy signatures leading away from inhabited space, a path so attractive that the swarm follows it instead of us." "Lead them where?" "Into a trap, a system with intense energy signatures but no actual life. When they arrive, expecting a feast, they find something else entirely." Chen pulled up a stellar map. "There's a binary pulsar system on the edge of our galaxy. 2 neutron stars orbiting each other, generating energy bursts powerful enough to be detected from 1,000,000 light-years away." "You want to lure the swarm into a pulsar system?" one scientist asked incredulously. "I want to cook them," Chen replied simply. "The radiation from those pulsars would sterilize anything organic within the system. If we can attract enough of the swarm into that zone, we might be able to eliminate a significant portion of their population." The plan was audacious. It was unprecedented. And according to every calculation the Council's scientists could perform, it might actually work. The next 18 months became a blur of activity across the entire galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, all member species of the Galactic Council worked together toward a common goal. Old rivalries were set aside. Ancient grudges were temporarily forgotten. The threat of extinction had a way of clarifying priorities. Commander Chen was placed in charge of the operation, which they called Project Beacon. Her role was not as a military commander but as a coordinator, someone who could see the big picture and ensure that all the pieces fit together. The project had 3 main phases. First, they needed to create the energy trail that would attract the swarm. This required placing thousands of powerful transmitters along a carefully calculated path through space. Each transmitter would broadcast the specific energy frequencies that attracted the void swarm, creating an irresistible highway leading to the pulsar system. Second, they needed to reinforce the pulsar system itself. While the natural radiation would harm the swarm, they wanted to ensure maximum lethality. Engineering teams from a dozen species worked together to construct a network of reflectors and amplifiers around the binary pulsars, focusing their deadly output into a concentrated zone. Third, and most challenging, they needed to evacuate the colonies that lay in the swarm's original path. Millions of people had to be moved to safety before the swarm arrived. This was where Chen's logistics background proved invaluable. "We can't move everyone at once," she explained to the evacuation coordinators. "We don't have enough ships. Instead, we need to prioritize. Start with the systems closest to the swarm's current position. Move them to intermediate staging areas, then redistribute from there." "What about those who refuse to leave?" someone asked. "There were always some who wouldn't abandon their homes, no matter the danger." "We convince them. And if we can't convince them, we make sure their sacrifice isn't in vain by saving everyone else." Chen's voice was steady, but those who knew her could see the weight of the decision in her eyes. As the months passed, the galaxy began to transform. The energy trail stretched across light years of space, a glowing pathway visible to the swarm's senses. Evacuated colonies went dark, their power systems shut down to reduce their attractiveness as targets, and in the pulsar system, the death trap grew more deadly with each passing day. Elder Moreth visited Chen at her command center on Kepler 442b. The ancient Keithrani moved slowly, but his mind remained sharp. "You have achieved something remarkable," Moreth said, gazing at the holographic display showing the project's progress. 43 species working together, old enemies cooperating. It would have been impossible 2 years ago. "Fear is a powerful motivator," Chen replied. "Fear could have made them fight each other. Instead, you gave them hope." Moreth turned to face her. "Do you know what the council members say about you now? They call you the Pathfinder, the one who sees roads where others see walls." Chen shook her head. "I'm just a logistics officer who asks a lot of questions." "And that is precisely what makes you extraordinary." Moreth's ancient eyes held warmth. "Other species produce warriors, scientists, philosophers. Humans produce people who refuse to accept that problems cannot be solved. In 800 years of life, I have never seen anything quite like it." The Void Swarm arrived at the edge of Council space exactly on schedule. Sensors tracked billions of organisms moving through the void, a living cloud of destruction that blotted out the stars behind it. Chen watched from her command center as the first transmitters activated. The energy trail blazed to life, a beacon calling to the swarm with promises of rich feeding grounds ahead. For 3 tense days, nothing happened. The swarm continued on its original course, seemingly ignoring the trail. "It's not working," Admiral Zeixthar reported grimly. "They're not responding to the transmitters." Chen studied the data, looking for patterns. "The signal strength is too uniform. It doesn't look natural to them. Real life doesn't broadcast at constant levels." "What do you suggest?" "We make it messier. Add variations in frequency and intensity. Make it look like real civilizations, not artificial beacons." Chen began typing commands. "We need to simulate the energy signatures of actual inhabited worlds." The modifications took 12 hours to implement. When the new signals went out, the effect was immediate. The leading edge of the swarm shifted direction. Then more followed. Within a week, the entire mass had altered course, following the energy trail toward the pulsar system. The galaxy held its breath. The journey took 3 months. Chen tracked the swarm's progress obsessively, watching for any sign that they might deviate from the path. Several times, portions of the swarm seemed to hesitate near inhabited systems that hadn't been fully evacuated. Each time, Chen ordered additional transmitters activated, drawing them back onto the trail. Finally, the swarm reached the binary pulsar system. The organisms poured into the system, drawn by energy signatures that dwarfed anything they had ever encountered. Billions of them, then trillions, flooding into the radiation zone like moths to a flame. And then the pulsars fired. The concentrated radiation swept through the swarm in waves. The reflectors and amplifiers worked exactly as designed, focusing the deadly energy into the densest concentrations of organisms. The creatures had no defense against this level of radiation. They weren't being attacked, they were being sterilized. The initial sweep killed trillions. The survivors tried to flee, but more were pouring in from behind, drawn by the irresistible energy signatures. They were trapped in a kill zone of their own making. For 6 months, the massacre continued. Chen monitored the data with grim satisfaction, watching the swarm's numbers decline day by day. It wasn't complete annihilation. Some organisms had escaped the trap, scattered into the void. But the main body of the swarm, the vast majority of their population, was being systematically destroyed. When the final reports came in, the Galactic Council convened to receive them. The void swarm has been reduced to approximately 2% of its original size, the scientific advisor announced. The surviving fragments are scattered and disorganized. They no longer pose a threat to civilized space. The chamber erupted in celebration. Representatives from species that had been enemies for millennia embraced each other. Tears flowed freely among those who had expected to watch their civilizations die. Admiral Zeixthar approached Commander Chen, who stood quietly at the edge of the celebration. The Valorian warrior who had once dismissed her as a mere clerk now bowed his head in respect. "On behalf of the Valorian Empire, I thank you," he said formally. "You have saved not just our worlds but our species. Our children will speak your name with reverence." "Thank everyone who helped build the project," Chen replied. "I just asked the right questions. The answers came from all of us working together." Elder Morath appeared at her side. "The Council has been discussing your future, Commander. They wish to offer you a permanent position as strategic advisor to the Galactic Assembly." Chen considered the offer. It was an honor beyond anything she had imagined, a human given a voice in the highest levels of galactic governance. "I'll accept," she said finally, "on one condition. I want to establish a multi-species academy for training commanders in creative problem-solving, not just military strategy, everything. Logistics, psychology, systems analysis, unconventional thinking. A place where the next generation can learn to see the angles that others miss." Morath's ancient face broke into a genuine smile. "I believe that can be arranged." 5 years later, the Chen Academy for Strategic Studies opened its doors on a neutral world selected by the Galactic Council. The campus sprawled across a beautiful valley, with buildings designed by architects from a dozen different species. Each structure reflected its creator's aesthetic while harmonizing with the whole. On the first day, Chen stood before her inaugural class, 300 students representing 47 species. Some were military officers seeking new perspectives. Others were diplomats, scientists, or administrators. A few were simply curious individuals who had heard stories about the human commander who had saved the galaxy. "Welcome to the Academy," Chen began. "You're here because someone believes you have potential, but potential for what? That's the question we'll spend your time here answering." She paced slowly across the stage, making eye contact with students of all shapes and sizes. "I'm going to tell you a secret. I'm not special. I don't have superhuman intelligence or mysterious powers. I wasn't born with any gift that others lack. What I have is a habit of asking questions that seem obvious but rarely get asked. When everyone assumes something is impossible, I ask why. When everyone accepts a limitation, I ask what created that limit. When everyone sees a problem one way, I ask what it looks like from a different angle." She stopped at the center of the stage. "That's what this academy will teach you, not answers questions. The right questions asked at the right time can change everything. The curriculum was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Students studied biology, psychology, engineering, and economics not as separate subjects, but as interconnected systems. They learned to recognize patterns across disciplines, to see how a principle from one field might apply to a completely different problem. They studied historical conflicts, analyzing not just the famous victories but the overlooked details that made those victories possible. They learned about supply chains and resource management, about communication networks and social dynamics, about the psychology of fear and the mechanics of hope. Most importantly, they learned to fail. Chen designed exercises that were intentionally impossible to solve using conventional methods. Students would struggle, make mistakes, and discover that failure was not an ending but a beginning, an opportunity to find better approaches. Every failed attempt teaches you something, Chen told her students. It eliminates possibilities, reveals hidden assumptions, and forces you to think differently. The person who has failed 100 times knows more than the person who has never tried. The Academy's first graduates entered galactic service 3 years later. They were immediately recognizable by their approach to problems, the questions they asked, the connections they made, the solutions they proposed. Some went into military service, others into diplomacy, science, or commerce. All of them carried the same fundamental training. The impact was gradual but profound. Conflicts that might have escalated into wars were resolved through creative negotiation. Economic crises were anticipated and prevented. Scientific breakthroughs accelerated as researchers learned to collaborate across species boundaries. The Galactic Council began to change as well. Old patterns of rivalry and competition slowly gave way to a more cooperative approach. Species that had been enemies for centuries found common ground. The threat of the Void Swarm had shown what could be accomplished when everyone worked together, and the Academy's graduates ensured that lesson wasn't forgotten. Elder Morath visited the Academy often, delighting in conversations with students and faculty. His health was declining, even Keith Ronnie could not live forever, but his spirits remained high. "I have witnessed many things in my long life," he told Chen during one of his final visits. "The rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of stars, but I never expected to see what you have created here." "What have I created?" Chen asked. "Hope, genuine, sustainable hope." Morath's ancient eyes were bright despite his failing body. "Before you, the galaxy operated on fear and strength. The strong dominated the weak. Conflicts were inevitable. Now there is another way, a way that rewards creativity over brutality, cooperation over competition." "I didn't create that," Chen protested. "The war against the swarm proved it was possible. All I did was help others see it." "And that is enough." Morath reached out and placed his hand on hers. "You helped others see. That is perhaps the greatest gift anyone can give." Morath passed away 3 months later. The Galactic Council declared a period of mourning that spanned all member species. At the memorial service, Chen spoke about the ancient Keith Ronnie who had seen something valuable in humanity when others saw only weakness. "Elder Morath believed in the power of questions," she said. "He spent his life asking why things had to be the way they were and whether they could be different. That curiosity saved countless lives, including my own. It saved my species when we were just beginning our journey among the stars." She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives from across the galaxy. "He once told me that humans are dangerous because we refuse to accept limitations. I've thought about those words often. He was right, but I've come to believe that this quality isn't unique to humans. It's something that exists in all species, waiting to be awakened. Look around this chamber. Look at how much has changed in just a few years. Species working together, problems being solved, hope growing where there was once only fear. This didn't happen because humans are special. It happened because we all decided together to ask better questions and find better answers. The years that followed became known as the Age of Questions. The Academy grew, establishing satellite campuses across the galaxy. New generations of students learned to think creatively, to challenge assumptions, to find the angles that others missed. Commander Chen served as the Academy's head for 20 years before stepping down to allow younger leaders to shape its future. In her retirement, she wrote extensively about her philosophy and methods, creating a body of work that would be studied for centuries. She died peacefully at the age of 92, surrounded by former students who had traveled from across the galaxy to be with her. The Galactic Council declared a day of remembrance in her honor, the first time such recognition had been given to any individual, human or otherwise. At the memorial, the current head of the Academy, a Valorian named Zyxthar the Younger, grandson of the admiral who had once tried to conquer Chen's home colony, spoke about her legacy. "Commander Chen taught us that strength comes in many forms," he said. "The strongest weapon is not a fleet of ships or an army of soldiers. It is a mind willing to see what others cannot, to ask what others dare not, to try what others believe impossible." She came to our attention as a simple logistics officer facing an impossible situation. She left us as a legend who changed the course of galactic history. But she would want me to tell you that she was neither simple nor legendary. She was just a person who refused to stop asking questions. That is her true gift to us. Not the strategies she developed or the victories she won, but the example she set. She showed us that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things if they are willing to think differently. He paused, looking out at the vast assembly. In her final writings, Commander Chen asked one last question. She asked what kind of galaxy we would choose to build now that we had the tools to build anything. She didn't give us an answer. She said that finding the answer was our responsibility, our opportunity, our privilege. Today, as we honor her memory, I ask each of you to consider that question. What will you build? What problems will you solve? What impossible things will you make possible? The memorial concluded with a moment of silence, followed by the lighting of beacons across the galaxy, one for each world that Chen's strategies had helped to save. The lights shone across thousands of light years, a testament to what one person could accomplish by simply asking the right questions. And in academies and schools across the galaxy, young minds of every species learned the lesson that would define the ages to come, that the greatest power in the universe was not the ability to destroy, but the courage to create. That wars were won not by the strongest army, but by the cleverest mind. That even the smallest voice could change everything, if it knew how to ask the right questions. Commander Sarah Chen had earned legendary status not through conquest or destruction, but through something far more powerful: creative strategy that turned weakness into strength, turned enemies into allies, and turned impossible problems into opportunities for growth. And that, in the end, was the most human victory of all.